Hey Snapchat, yesterday I talked about recruiting at a startup and people asked me a whole bunch more tips, so I'm going to offer a little more today. First of all, a friend of mine reminded me that when you use contingent-based search firms, you want to pay the higher rate, not the lower rate. Here's why. Let's say there's a range that contingent search firms would accept between 12 to 20% of salary. The people who pay the highest range get the best resumes and they send them to many people. Whereas when you use executive search or sponsored search, they're only working for you. So every CV you see should be something that other people aren't seeing. I want to now talk about how you talk about compensation with prospective employees. Number one, it is your job to know how much they're paid today. It may feel uncomfortable, but you need to understand a little bit about whether you're going to be paying more or less and how they're going to feel about that. People have a tendency to want to exaggerate both on compensation, how they were reviewed, how well they did in school. It's just human nature, and let's accept that, and I'll try to help you. During the interview, I like to say to people, during diligence, I'm going to pull W-2s. So if I were to pull your W-2, what would it say you made last year? It's kind of just a nice way of keeping people honest, and telling them that you're going to check in diligence just reminds them to actually stick to the facts. If the job requires a lot of travel, you're going to want to know if they really have a lot of propensity for travel. Everyone will tell you travel is no problem, but here's how to find out if it is. I know your last role in BizDev would have required you to travel a lot. During diligence, we obviously pull your airline miles. How much would it say on your airline miles you traveled last year? I'm not saying it's a bad thing if they didn't travel a lot. I just think it forces a more honest conversation because people have a propensity to exaggerate, even to themselves. I know you don't want me to call your current boss right now, but before we get to final offer, I may have to. What would your boss actually say if I called? Another thing I talked about in yesterday's Snapstorm is recruiting fatigue. The fact that when you've been doing a process for a long time, at the end you get worn down and accept lower quality. I was talking about external recruiters, but an in-house recruiter wrote me and said the same thing is true inside companies. Just remind yourself not to get fatigued. If you're recruiting for a role, it really helps to see 3 or 4 candidates. It just helps you calibrate the differences in skills, background, and technique. Referencing is everything. So for me, I have one really important recommendation inside your company. I would much rather pay $5,000 or whatever amount, $2,000 to an existing employee who refers someone that they tell you is great than a recruiter. It has a double benefit of your employee not only knowing the person, but they certainly don't want them to join and suck or they're going to be held accountable. Referrals from your employees are your best. Many people blindly give offers without really testing it with the employee first. I'm going to tell you how to talk about cash, bonus, and equity. I like to tell people, look, there's certainly some flexibility on salary, some flexibility on options. What I want to figure out is what your relative trade-off is. We operate within bands, so there's not huge flexibility. But if you could get slightly more salary and less equity, or slightly more equity and less salary, which do you prefer? Getting the candidate involved in a discussion about what the offer might look like helps you to better offer something up that's more likely to make them happy.